Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel. Today, taking a look at a story by Ghastly Graham Ingels from the days of EC Comics. Graham Ingels is a personal favorite of mine when you look back at those old EC artists. His horror work is, uh, to me, second to none. I think he is fantastic. His influence on other great artists that I love, like Bernie Wrightson, is very evident and clear. And this is a really awesome publication. I just picked this up recently. This is by Fantagraphics. They've apparently been publishing these collections since 2012, which I was unaware of. Just happened to spot them on at my local comic shop, and I picked up three of them. I picked up two Graham Ingels. I also picked up a Harvey Kurtzman collection. What these are just assortments of stories by specific artists from EC. So it's not like the collections of Haunt of Fear or collections of shock suspense stories. This is an entire book of just Graham Ingels' work. It's reprinted in they're reprinted in black and white, which is it's a little disappointing because I do like the Marie Severin colors quite a bit, but I also think that these EC masters, their artwork still sings in black and white. I mean, it really does. I know there's a Graham Ingels artist edition out there, at least one that I would love to get a hand on one day. Just because his I love the horror genre, and the way that he draws horror, I think, is just exceptional. There's the man himself, at in Florida in the 1970s. What was also cool about this book is that it contains a short biography of Graham Ingels, and it was a little bit like I don't know, a little disappointment to kind of learn about him because he signs all of his, well, most of his comics with the name Ghastly. Ghastly Graham Ingels is what he's known as, and so that led me to believe that he really loved working in the horror genre. It was something that he embraced and enjoyed, and it turns out that wasn't really the case. He got the gig at EC, and he just kind of fell into doing the horror titles. He happened to excel at it, but in the mid 50s, when EC Comics imploded due to the Comics Code Authority, he tried to distance himself like almost instantly, and it was actually tough for him because uh, those Senate hearings and all that specifically targeted horror comics, and his name was synonymous with EC horror comics. So he struggled with that. He was also a lifelong alcoholic. He ended up abandoning his wife and children in the early 60s, moved to Florida, got a girlfriend there, and like lived in relative obscurity, just picking up odd jobs, teaching art. And when he would be contacted by his old friends, like the Gaines family and George Evans and other EC comic artists, that was a lifelong friend of his, he would insist that, like, please don't tell anybody where I am. Like, I'm not going to attend any conventions. Like, I don't want to do any interviews. Like, I just kind of I just want to leave that part of my life behind, which is a little sad. But you know what? He still left us with the great work, and that is enough for me. You know what they say, don't meet your heroes. I'm flipping through some of these first stories here just really quickly. I hope you've been just kind of appreciating them. I've stopped and marked this one. This is the one I want to go over a little bit more in depth. It's Hounded to Death. And I wanted to focus on this one because I think this is a perfect showcase in just, I think, 6 pages of all of the skills that Graham Ingels brings to a horror comic. So the premise of this one is this woman's in an unhappy marriage with this guy, Edward. And what's her name? Anne. So Anne's not happy in her marriage. Her husband is a huntsman, and it opens with the braying of his dogs from the kennel. They're screaming, they're starving. He hasn't fed them all day because he wants them to be starving for the hunt tomorrow. She thinks this is inhumane. She can't stand the sight of this guy. She doesn't like hunting. She doesn't like anything about him. And their marriage is kind of falling apart, and he's extremely jealous. He basically threatens her, if I ever even catch you looking at another man, I'll sick the hounds on him. They'll tear him to shreds. Um, Firstly, the old witch, Graham Engels' old witch, is sensational every time that he draws the old witch. Uh, the way that he constructs a face, it just seems to me built for the horror genre. Like that is the ghastliest old woman that you've ever seen, and even the faces of his regular human characters they all kind of have a samey look. He really goes hard on these jowls, this harsh line from the edge of the nose down to the edge of the chin. He'll put that on like basically all of his male characters, especially if they are meant to be a an antagonist, because it ages them, makes them look a little bit more haggard, a little bit more unfriendly, and he combines it with like the great acting in the eyebrows, like these arch eyebrows, to just make them seem more sinister. His women, I don't know that I would ever describe his women as super beautiful, but he definitely he does a good enough job. Always some really plump, like full lips on his women. Always a very full, like the top lip and bottom lip are almost always like the same exact plumpness. Super colored in, like hard lipstick, or just very rounded and full. Uh, and I there's multiple examples here of him playing with the panels. So with EC Comics, the way that they produce them, all of the words that you see on the page were there when the artist was handed the pages. So all the writing and the scripting is done, like the reverse of the Marvel method, essentially. All of the words and everything are done before the artist even sees the page. So they have to work around the word bubbles, and they have to create interesting panels and interesting compositions while trying to dodge around these bubbles that already exist. And he finds ways to make the page interesting even when the bubbles are trying to lock him in to a standard grid. So this top middle panel here doesn't have it's not completely boxed in. It has the banister of the staircase swooping down to kind of break things up, to create a little bit more of an atmosphere, of setting the scene. This is also something that Engels does, where he'll put an object in the extreme foreground to create that setting, to create a mood. And we'll see another example on the very next page. This panel here, rather than using traditional borders, he uses the bedposts in their bedroom. Great. That's a fantastic, clever way to create some variety on the page. And here, no panel. It's open completely. And I also just love the way that he renders the roof here, because it's not just a single, it's multiple sections of the roof. There's something in the front. There's also a section that's angling outward this way, that's come out from this front roof. So just knowing how to hatch to create that depth with just very little lines, and also separate this little front from the back roof, like super just clever, smart, excellent work. Onto the next page. It's the day of the hunt, and Anne has agreed to go with her husband just because she needs to get out of the house. And she bumps into this guy, Steve. Steve is very handsome, very charming, and he doesn't really participate in the hunt. He's got a bad heart, and if he gets too worked up, he might have a heart attack, might die. And they are immediately kind of smitten. And this sequence here is like the best of romance comics. Like starting from here through to here would fit perfectly in a romance comic, and it wouldn't be out of place. While I don't find their faces to be my definition of like handsome and beautiful, again, he can't help that little line there on the edge of the lips that makes them just a little bit like kind of chunky in the cheek. These are romance characters. And so Steve's flirting with her. And here's another example of that, using an object in the extreme foreground to set the mood. These roses, this panel right here is the most romantic panel that ever appeared in a horror EC comic, maybe even any EC comic. It's great. It's beautiful. Great roses. Great use of silhouette. just creates a perfect atmosphere. So they lean in for a kiss. Anne pushes him off because she knows that if her husband catches them, she remembers his promise that Steve will get ripped apart by the hounds that get sicked on him. There's a moment here where her husband does kind of catch them, but he doesn't really catch them doing anything. They're just speaking to each other, but he's suspicious, and you could tell on his face again that arched eyebrow. Great acting in the body, the posture there, and just the composition of like the two men on either side of her. And again, the composition, her right in between their shoulders here as we go for an over the shoulder look on the husband, and her new suitor who's smiling. He's cocky, he's confident. It reads so well. I love this panel here. So her husband heads out for a business trip, and Steve pops in, pays her a visit, and the door opens, and we have like this panel separated by the doorway, and so you kind of get two panels in that panel, and they finally give in to their temptation, and they start to hook up regularly. That's what's set up here. Every time the husband goes out on a business trip, Steve will come over, and they'll fool around. A lot of phallic imagery of big dripping candles to really sell that point. But the worst thing that could possibly happen happens one day. The husband comes home early, and so they have to devise a plot that will get them reasonably out of this without the husband killing them both. So Anne tells Steve, just get on the floor. I'll tell him you had a heart attack. We know that you have a bad heart. I'll make this work. Another good open panel here. Nice. So the husband gets home. She tells him, Steve's here. He died, I think. He just collapsed right on the floor. He came over. He tried to seduce me. And I fought him off because I am your wife and I love you. So nothing bad was happening here. What are we going to do? Let's dump his body on the road like 4 miles from here. How about that? No one will even know he was here. And the husband goes, all right, yeah, let's do that. Really like the background that Ingels employs here. This it's radiating these black circles, and I can't tell quite how he did it. It looks like maybe a combination to me of using potentially like a dried out brush, because it's full on ink. It looks like brush strokes, but it looks like the ink is running out on it. But it also could just be maybe whiteout that's like smudged over it. Kind of hard for me to tell, but I look at something like that. It looks like really dry brush to me. So husband says, okay, yeah, I'll do that. He picks up the body, and as he's walking away, he says, I know exactly what was going on here. I'm not a fool. This guy's not even dead, but he's about to be. He drags him out to the hound kennel where they are, again, starving. They're being starved for the hunt tomorrow. Dumps his body in with the hounds. These hounds look super evil, by the way. Look at these extremely sharp teeth. Their arms are like human arms. Like, look at their disgusting tails on the next page. Ugh, they're gross. After he disposes of Steve's body with getting torn apart in silhouette behind him, he walks to the house saying, now I have to take care of my loving wife. We got the big axe right in front of him, framing him. Now, I, first reading this, thought, okay, he's going to take that axe, go into the house. The next time we see him, he doesn't have the axe. He's heading upstairs to go to her. He's just got his bare hands, and he notices that the hounds have stopped howling. And so he stops, looks back to see what's going on, and up the steps, here's the axe in the hands of, I guess, the zombified corpse of Stephen Baxter, who's come back for revenge. And that's the end of that story. As far as stories go, in terms of ending goes, I don't love that ending. It feels like it comes a little bit out of nowhere. There's a lot of better ones in here that are a bit more ironic conclusions that are really fun. But as far as the artistry goes, I think this is an example of Graham Ingels at his finest. I think there's so much greatness in these 8 pages. And it just continues. I've been reading through this slowly, a few stories a night, and it's super fun. I can't wait to read more. And I just love these editions. I might have to go pick up some more of these for some different artists. Um, and if you didn't know that these existed, and you have a particular EC artist that you like, that you wish that you could just get an edition of only their stuff and not have to get a collection of all of Shock Suspense Stories or all of Vault of Fear, this is a way to do it. So check your local comic shop for these. Let me know if there's anything in this issue that I missed. Tell me your favorite Graham Ingels story. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. But now it's time to get back to reading.